Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Common Good Data Podcast. My name is Drew Reynolds. Today, we're here to explore how data and storytelling strengthen programs and can improve communities. And we're going to do that through talking about something called a data trust. And we're joined by Sydney Idzikowski, the director of the Charlotte Regional Data Trust, to talk about what it takes to make administrative data really work for the public good. This is a really important challenge because we live in an environment where data are so siloed. One organization has their data, another organization has their data. And as a result of really good, thoughtful privacy laws that protects people's privacy, make it difficult for those organizations to share information. Well, the data trust tries to solve some of that. And it talks a little bit about what administrative data is, how it gets trapped in silos, and how an institution like the Regional Data Trust can link data across sectors like housing, education, public health to really better understand complex social challenges and to help people in turn help an entire community collectively respond to those challenges. We talk in this episode too about what it means to build trust in an era of data surveillance and privacy concerns, which is a really, really important topic. It's the topic of this episode, moving at the speed of trust. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about how data has directly influenced policy and programs, from school supports to youth experiencing homelessness to county-wide indicators on housing stability and more. It's a fantastic episode, folks. I'm really excited to share it all with you. It's a really powerful example of how integrated data systems can, as we said, move at the speed of trust, and how social workers and researchers and public leaders alike can use data to think more systematically and in turn act more collaboratively as a community. So very excited, and we'll go ahead and dive right on in.
So, Sydney, we thank you so much for joining us today for our podcast. We're excited to have you on. This has been an interview that I've been looking forward to. So, I'm going to go ahead and dive into our first question. So, Sydney, let's talk about the challenges of administrative service data at the local level. What is the biggest problem, or what is the big problem that you and the Data Trust are set out to solve?
Yeah, thank y'all both for having me. Super happy to be here. So first I want to back up and just make sure everyone understands what we mean when we say administrative data, right? So this is data that is collected by government and nonprofit agencies about the people they serve. And administrative data is primarily collected for operational purposes at these agencies, not research purposes. So you can think about all the government agencies running programs like Medicaid, food assistance, housing, and all the nonprofit agencies also providing services to the community. They're all collecting data and information about the people they're serving to run their own programs and to track their own impact. And at the same time, these agencies and programs exist because they're really trying to solve larger social issues that exist and remediate those social challenges like poverty, housing instability, and health. So that's kind of what we mean by administrative data. And that's the heart of the data trust. And so the data trust is here to address a central problem. And that is that all these challenges that the agencies and our larger communities are trying to solve really span across all these agencies, systems, and sectors, right? So like housing instability doesn't exist just within housing agencies. But all that information and data that's collected by all these agencies doing all this amazing work gets trapped inside all the agencies, and for really good reasons, right? Like privacy concerns for sharing data, the legal agreements needed to allow data to be shared across agencies, and then the technical capacity for to securely store, manage, and then put that data to use. But the fact of the matter is that it's really hard to address everything that's before us when we have fragmented information. And the complex challenges and the solutions we're striving for require more complex data. And so that's where we come in with the data trust. We are here to bring together this fragmented data that exists across our community and use it to solve complex social challenges. We are here to tackle all those reasons why data gets trapped, right? The legal concerns and complexities, the technical needs, and the governance structures to ensure we're using data ethically. And importantly, link all that data together so that it's no longer fragmented.
Thanks for sharing that. I think of the data trust as I mean, it's almost like a twofold word, right? So there's the trust component of it, which is all these agencies are trusting y'all with this information and how to
Mhm.
figure out ways to put it out into the community or how it's shareable. But then also the concepts of a trust, like when you think of like a trust fund or so, where something exists and it's secured and it's safe and it's only to be used, for important reasons or moments. So I really like that it's the data trust. Yeah. And so this exists for a reason, for good, and to also cross pollinate. How do you help agencies cross pollinate with their data and information for good use?
Right, and to collaborate on solutions as well. And I'm glad I was going to touch on that later, Roger, too. But we changed our name in 2022 from the Institute for Social Capital, or ISC, to the Data Trust to better reflect kind of what we are holding all this important information in trust and how we operate, leading with trust. So.
I want to kind of follow up on that too a little bit because it's for those who don't know about the data trust. I mean, the work that you guys do is incredibly important, incredibly detailed, and sometimes maybe hard to explain. So I want to take another kind of follow up to your question, to the original question. And maybe can you share why is it important that we link all this data in the first place? Like what problems are we going to be able to explore or solve or better be able to address because we have all these agencies who previously weren't sharing data now sharing data?
Yeah, great question. So one of the main things is really, like I said, this collaborative solutions. When the Data Trust was founded back in 2004, it was these kind of big entities in Charlotte, North Carolina came together and said, we're serving the same people. We know we're serving the same children and families. How can we understand how well we're doing at that? And how we can better work together to promote well-being. So that was kind of really at the basis of why we were started in the first place. But then taking a look at, understanding trends and use of programs and services across time, the data trust and other integrated data systems hold a rich amount of historical data. So linking data together over time allows us to better understand trends, right? Or and better target prevention and intervention. So, for example, we have several kind of violence prevention studies happening right now that are really taking a kind of historical or backwards look at, okay, we know that these individuals have these instances, they ended up experiencing violence or causing violence in one way or the other. What were their experiences over their life course? And then what can we learn from that to better target interventions to support young adults and children? So that's one example.
Awesome. I think it's a good example too, where you kind of like able to really almost see the many different ways in which any individual, it has an interaction with the social service system in some capacity, or in beyond that too. Criminal justice and others as well. So you talked a little bit historically about how the data trust started, a little bit about its history. Can you talk maybe a little bit more too about how it works? So if somebody is interested in participating, either sharing data themselves as an organization, or maybe you're a researcher and you want to do research, how do you get connected to the Charlotte Regional Data Trusts?
Yeah. So the Charlotte Regional Data Trust we're called an integrated data system. And we're actually part of a larger national network called Actionable Intelligence for Social Policy, or AISP, that supports the development and growth and peer networks of other places that are doing this super crazy work. So if anyone wants to really dive into what it takes to build and maintain an integrated data system, that their website, the AISP website, has amazing resources. and we love them. So getting involved with the data trust, yeah, we have lots of different avenues, right? So bringing data in, right? So thinking about kind of the two main components of my job: bringing data into the system and moving data out of our system. So bringing data in, if an agency or potential data partner is interested in becoming sharing their data with us, we work with them on to execute legal data sharing agreements, so that individual level data that does have personal identifiers in it, can be shared for research purposes. So, like I said, administrative data is not collected for research purposes. Integrated data systems like the data trust repurpose that data for research planning and evaluation. So we negotiate those legal agreements with the data partners. And in those legal agreements, we use exemptions to privacy law so that this type of data can be shared for these purposes and used for research. These relationships can take years in the making, and we know that, that we're here for the long run. So we focus really heavily on building and maintaining relationships with our data partners, because I need them once they start sharing data too, right? These are the folks who serve on our committees, who update data on a regular basis, who can answer questions when people want to use the data. So we focus really heavily on relationships to bring data into our system. And so if anyone is interested in sharing data, you can, I'm kind of the funnel for all things data trust. So definitely come my way. We also we're working on building a strategic research agenda. So I kind of want to, let me say too, the data trust is part of the UNC Charlotte Urban Institute. And the Urban Institute is a 55-year-old organization now, that does applied social research in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg community. So we've been a part of the Institute. So we're developing a larger strategic research agenda that will also help us make sure we have the right data and the right data partners to answer questions on the research agenda. So that's super exciting. And then on the data outside, we do allow people to make requests of the data at the data trust, right? It takes a lot of work to bring it all together, and we really, really want it and need it to be used, right? Because collecting data just for the sake of collecting data is not great. We need to put it to use. So Drew is very familiar with this process, for better or worse, requesting data. But if anyone wants to request data from the data trust, they need to submit what's called a data license request, that outlines a clear purpose for the use of data. If anyone's familiar with like an IRB, the request will look very familiar. It asks a lot of things about the study, right? Who's going to be on it? What data do you want? What are your research questions? What's the benefit and risks? How are you going to share what you find? And then this request is reviewed by what's called our Data and Research Oversight Committee. And this committee is made up of the people who work at agencies who share data with us. And this is how they retain oversight over the use of this data. So,
Oh, the fun IRB. The fun IRB process. Yay.
oh yes. fun research processes.
For those who are familiar with the IRB process out there, you know the sarcastic tone of the IRB process. I'm kidding. It's done for an excellent and purposeful reason. So we should all be happy and excited that we get to go through the IRB process when it's needed. Sydney, talking about all these different points, right? So all these different sectors that agencies or even yourself or folks intersect. Privacy and confidentiality, I would imagine, ends up being a big challenge because you're sharing that data across organizations, and so you want to be mindful of how it's shared and what is shared. So can you share a little bit about how you approach this, and maybe share some tips for our listeners about what should they think about with data privacy and confidentiality?
So this is always number one, right? The data held at the data trust represents real people. And all of us have data in lots of different places. And the data we have at the data trust can represent someone on their worst day, right? One of their worst days. So maybe a child welfare investigation or an arrest, or maybe on one of their best days, like securing home ownership, right? So there's a wide range of experiences represented among the people in the data. And because we hold data from government and nonprofit organizations, the people represented are seeking assistance for one way or another. And we know that, across integrated data systems, the data largely represent people living with low incomes or lower incomes, right? And we learned, we did a kind of study or look at who was represented in the data at the data trust. And we learned that for us, people who identify as Black or multiracial are overrepresented in the folks who make up our data when compared to Mecklenburg County as a whole. We also know that people who are in integrated data systems using services, living in poverty, and people of color are some of the most heavily surveilled people in our communities, right? So, and this is the data we have, right, at the data trust. And by linking all that data together, it enhances that risk, right, of surveillance and privacy. So this is something we take super, super seriously at the data trust and across kind of our network. And also, like, in this moment, data sharing is kind of a bad word, right? We're seeing horrific examples of how government entities are using shared data and linked data for really harmful purposes. So it's even of a higher importance maybe right now. So the way we approach this at the data trust comes back to that word, right? Rather, trust. So we know, we have the saying that data moves at the speed of trust. Even if you have all of the legal agreements, privacy stipulations, all these governance pieces in place, people have to trust in the system and trust in us that we are here to protect their data and use the information for good. So that's kind of the basis on how we operate. And I kind of said it earlier, but we focus heavily on relationships, right? So we have all of our legit paperwork, right? And we've gone through different iterations where we like really start with how legit we are and look at all these things we have, and we have our legal agreements that our general counsel of the university crafted, and we have our secure terminals and servers that have very limited access, right? But really, it does come down to those relationships, right? And really making sure that we're having honest conversations with our data partners and with the people whose data are represented in the data at the data trust, to make sure that we're being transparent, that everyone has their questions answered, and that concerns are addressed. And we always tell, like, when we're talking to data partners, that we'd be concerned if they weren't concerned about privacy and security. So, that's kind of how we go about that when people have very real and legitimate questions about how are we making sure this data is secured. Let's see, what else do I want to say about that? Oh, as far as tips go, honestly, if you're thinking about privacy and confidentiality, you're already starting off in a good place.
Right.
The one thing I would recommend is documenting data privacy policies and practices at any entity, organization, right? What do you have in place? How are you going about it? And then really making sure that everyone is clear on those things. And then just come back to trust, right? Treat the data the way you would want your data treated. So I can go into more specifics about our documents if you need, or our processes. But
I love what you
Go
mentioned.
ahead,
Well,
Roger.
I was just going to say, I love what you mentioned. Three key words here is trust, relationship, and documentation, right? And so I teach and by the way, all three, we have a super trio on this podcast today because we three are social workers, right? So um, we know and appreciate the value.
Woo!
Yeah, let's go. We know and appreciate the value of ethics and how to function in an ethical manner. And so I teach our ethics, professional behaviors, and communication course here at UNC Charlotte. And for if any of the listeners are students or former students or just social workers, I believe they probably appreciate that you mentioned the trust, relationship, and documentation because those three are very key when working with communities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and honestly, the integrated data world is a wonderful world for social workers. There's a lot of social workers in this field, and it's all about the connections, right? How do we understand people in their communities more holistically? And then how do we get systems to work together to promote well-being? So it's a great landscape for social workers.
I think it makes sense. As a field, we kind of take pride in working interdisciplinary places. Recognizing that individuals are within and interact with lots of different organizations, and so it seems to make a lot of sense. Social workers are also big on evaluation, as you know. That's something that I'm always talking about myself. So I would love if you could share a little bit about how, certainly many people use the data to maybe ask evaluation questions or research questions, but how do you as an entity define success, and what metrics would you use to define your own success in accomplishing your mission, which I suspect would be a challenging task?
Yeah, so let's see. I'll speak to how we define data within like the data trust work. I will say the larger Urban Institute has other metrics, but for the data trust, let's see. I listed 5 things for what success looks like. First is the number of data partners, right? The number of people who have signed agreements that have bought into this shared data ecosystem that we hold and trust. And right now that number is 65. So 65
Wow.
entities have signed legal agreements with us at the Data Trust. About half of those are within the homeless management information system. So these are the entities providing homelessness services, housing stability services within our continuum of care here in Mecklenburg County. But we do have agreements with every single one of them, individual agreements, so we count it. And then a sub-measure of that is kind of who is regularly providing data that we house and that is available for research, readily available for research, planning, and evaluation. And that number is 43. Again, a large chunk of that 30 is within the homeless management information system. But we have a broad range of large and government and nonprofit and of varying sizes too, who regularly provide data to the data trust. So that we do have our code books and all of our data documentation publicly available. So if anyone is interested in what all exists, that is all lovingly documented and online and available. A second way we define success is kind of how many people are using the data trust, how many projects are putting the data trust to use. So let's see, in 2024, we had a total of 6 requests that were submitted. I will say these studies typically last several years. And so the way I count kind of our metrics is how many people are submitting something, are making a request in a given year. So that was 6 last year. I think the year before in 2023, we had 12. And then so far in 2025, we've had 6. So, and we expect it to continue growing as we bring in more data partners and continue to promote the data trust as a resource. We've started to take a look at how representative our data is of our population, right? Or how well the data trust represents our overall population. So we put out a report in December called the State of Our Data Report, which is something we'll update annually. But this tells us a lot about, we ask questions like who's represented in the data trust? How many unique people do we have across all of these agencies? And how are they linked together, right? How do they overlap across these systems? So a lot of fun charts in that report as well. But one of the main things we learned there is that the data trust holds data for about 35% of Mecklenburg County's population. And in 2023, we had, 370, 434 unique individuals who were part of the data trust or access an agency during 2023. So I'd say right now we're not fully representative of Mecklenburg County or our region, but we are striving and growing in that direction. And then I mentioned it before too, but the amount of longitudinal data we have, right? Like how rich is the data and how much is available. So some of our data partners, that data begins in the early 2000s. And then one thing I want to look more towards in the future is as we get better at really sharing these findings and engaging the community and promoting the findings that from projects that use the data trust, I would want a number of kind of how much engagement happened around these findings. So y'all got me going on that question.
Yeah. Well, certainly it speaks to the expansive work that you've been doing in terms of, having a data on roughly a third of Mecklenburg County residents, and being able to, have some of those different studies come in, use the data and answer important questions. So that's really cool. Roger, take the next one.
Yeah, excellent. Sydney, thanks for sharing all of that. I think the work that y'all do is incredible. It's important. And my hope is that listeners will tap into the data trust and perhaps reach out to you if they have questions about just not only how to utilize it, but what is it, right? Yeah, you have a wealth of information to share, and so we're just so thankful for that. What we would like to hear about is a story, a case study, right? So if you can share a case study of how the data trust has been used by researchers or practitioners to answer important program and policy questions, because we know sharing narratives can be very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Anyone who wants to talk more, come join our family. We love this nerdy work that we do. So yeah, we strive to be a resource and have situated ourselves to be a resource for both universities and community members. So lots of diverse people and expertise are welcome to come and use the data. One of the things that we like to lift up is we've had a long-term partnership with Mecklenburg County's community support services. So these are and specifically their team who work in homeless services and preventions in our county. And as part of the annual reporting that goes on in our community about housing instability and homelessness, the data trust has been used, I think, across 5 years now to explore a specific aspect or specific population of people experiencing homelessness, or kind of the kind of pathway from housing instability to stable housing. The spectrum, that's the housing spectrum. So with this partnership, kind of every year they've dived into a different population, a different sample population. So, and these are all available publicly online, so people can go and reference that on kind of Mecklenburg County's housing website. But this has been really cool. And one of the things we're going to do here in a little bit is pull together kind of all the things we've learned over the past 10 years about homelessness via linked data. So some of the populations that have been looked at in this is children and families, right? This was one of the first ones that people really wanted questions. What's going on with children and families in our community experiencing homelessness? What services are they using? How can we better serve them? And one of the things this study found, and granted, this was back in like 2015, so things may look different now. But one of the things that this study found that is just a really good example of not really a complex project, right? We linked together kids who were staying in shelter at that time and kids and their records within school, their school records. So just kind of a simple link of those individuals. And what this study found was that nearly 40% of those kids who were currently staying in a shelter were not connected to McKinney-Vento services within school for one reason or another, right? We know. So there's lots of reasons for that. But that really raised a red flag and said, well, how can we get this resource and support to these kids and families? How can we get them better connected to that? So that led to the placement of a full-time social worker at one of our main shelters in town to really help kids and families get enrolled in this support to promote stability within school. So that's one example. But another, over other years, different populations were looked at, right? Like people who were previously incarcerated in our county jail. How are they experiencing homelessness before and after, right? Their incarceration. Are they coming back? Are they being jailed again? This is a tiny population, right? This is a small number. But really kind of looking at how can we help, promote stability of this population. And then we've also looked at what single adults, right? Single adults make up a huge proportion of the population of people experiencing homelessness. What's going on for single adults? And then the other thing we looked at too was for people using a key homelessness prevention service in our community, what percentage of those individuals are then entering into homelessness once they've applied for those services? Again, very small numbers, so that was fairly effective in helping prevent homelessness in the short term. So yeah, lots of cool things. We're gonna piece it all together here shortly, and tell that story. But yeah.
I love it. No, thank you.
And that's, and using that data year over year to kind of say, how can we explore a different question? It was really great.
Well, I love how what you just mentioned about the utilization of the data and the work. The outcome was a social worker who needed to be present in order to provide that type of support. We need, and Drew, I say this all the time. The world needs social workers, and we need more social workers in all spaces. And so the work that y'all are doing is very pivotal. Is very pivotal to get social workers out there in the world.
Yeah, and linking this information together too helps practitioners, including lots of social workers, better understand these different aspects of, in this case, homelessness and housing instability, and work to kind of coordinate those services. So yeah, it's critical, man.
And it's a great example of systems thinking. I feel like Roger and I have both taught courses across the MSW, curriculum. And one of the big things we talk about, especially in the foundation year of MSW and BSW programs, are how to incorporate systems thinking and to use that theoretical perspective in the work that we do. And usually when we present it, it's always kind of like, oh yeah, that kind of makes my sense. A lot of, different systems coming together. But it's only when you kind of see it, placed out here where you kind of see why, it actually really does matter to think in this way.
Mhm.
And that when we do ask those questions from a systems perspective, we are able to identify gaps. Like you mentioned, not having so many, youth who were eligible for McKinney-Vento, not having access to it because of the way our systems were set up. So I think it's just a great example and a good example of data trust work, but also social work thinking. So
another thing I want to mention to you in terms of like case study is, we've got data at the individual level for very deep and complex research. Another way the data trust has been used, or the data we have at the data trust, we aggregate that data up and use it as on our quality life explorer, so on our main kind of indicator project. So this is a mapping tool that displays over 80 indicators that relate to quality of life for Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, and several variables from that come from the data trust. So us kind of being this repository to be able to update this data and make it publicly available in a safe and protected way, but is a way that's very impactful. So things like all of the education data, the local education data that's on there, test scores, school attendance, chronic absenteeism, and then also use of public benefits like food stamps or SNAP.
Sydney, I need to have you come in as a guest speaker for one of the courses I teach. Better yet, Sydney, I feel like you should apply to be one of our adjunct faculty. So we'll have a separate conversation about that. But this has been awesome.
Okay.
This has been incredible. Thank you so much for sharing everything. Drew, I think we might pop into our pop culture time now. All right.
Well, Roger, I'm happy to come and speak to your class whenever. You let me know.
Excellent. I definitely will let you know.
Hit me with pop culture.
All right. So, Sydney, all this talk about data has been great. I love it. And this is how passionate I am about this podcast. Is I'm coming to you. Well, for me, it's live right now from Holden Beach, North Carolina, because it's summertime and it is vacation time, right? So it got me thinking about, you know, when I think about summertime, not necessarily vacation time, but just summertime in general, um, like what kind of music or what was I doing around my childhood in the 80s or 90s that would bring me back? And I noticed that you are a Dolly Parton fan, so I'm imagining that there are some songs or maybe in an album that maybe you can connect with a point of your time as a youth during summer. For me, I was thinking about when I senior year in high school, going to the beach, and the whole way there, we had tape players in our car, y'all. So my tape, I had Boston's first album, and we must have listened to that. Oh my God, I probably burnt that tape out, but we listened to Boston's first album, and the first song, More Than a Feeling, was so every time yesterday I was on the beach and I was listening to music and I had my Spotify on shuffle and Boston's More Than a Feeling came up and it just took me back to 1991, right? Senior beach trip, 1991. And I was flooded with memories, their car trip, the cassette player, the pit stops along the way. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Sydney, you're up.
Okay, fun fact: Dolly Parton and I have the same birthday, so
Nice.
yes, we're connected.
Kindred spirits.
Yes, kindred spirits. I know. I love shit. I love her. I've actually never been to Dollywood too, so that is on my bucket list. But in terms of something that brings me back to summertime, or a song, I mean, my family loves loud music. We love music. But so something that brings me back, I guess, to summertime growing up. I grew up in Colorado, in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. So we'd go on a lot of hiking and camping trips. And I guess this isn't really music, but one of the things that like always brings me back to driving around in the summer with my parents, like packing up the car, windows down, knowing we're going somewhere fun, is Car Talk from NPR.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of taking this less away from Dolly because Dolly won my heart, I think, as an adult. But as a kid, yeah, like Car Talk. If Car Talk was on, it was a good day.
Nice.
And we were out doing something fun as a family in kind of just the beautiful, sunny Colorado.
Excellent.
Saturday mornings, man, the Click and Clack brothers.
I know, right? Yeah.
my wife's from Colorado actually, and she was also a big. We both were big on Car Talk. for the longest time. I don't know if it's still on anymore, but
I don't think, yeah.
classic radio. Oh man, I feel like I have to say "Boys of Summer" from Don Henley. I think it's 1984 for like just a classic summer song. My kids are really into Bruce Springsteen right now, which makes me really happy because it's probably because I put it on all the time. But like those are just like those classic rock 80s vibes. Like you hear it at anywhere you're out or at the pool or whatever. And I feel like those always bring me back to those awesome moments. But because and Roger always loves to talk about how I'm the millennial and he's the Gen X in this relationship. So I feel like I have to add a late 90s song in there to truly represent my age group. And so I'm going to add in the song Kiss Me by Sixpence None the Richer, which I feel like epitomizes like your one hit wonder 90s kind of jams, that like you would just be played. Like I have so many memories that like, just going to the pool and hearing all these 90s one hit wonder songs. And I feel like that one hits the summer vibe. So
Excellent. Good choice.
Very airy and carefree.
Yeah, good choice. Good
very.
choice.
Yeah.
So before we hop off, I do want to give a shout out real quick because Sydney, you work with one of my faves. Dr. Lori Thomas has to be one of the most significant individuals that I have met here in the Charlotte area, who is passionate not only about social work, but just as passionate about data. She's passionate about people, and it just she presents it in a way that you just fall in love with data. You fall in love with her and her work. You just fall in love with trying to help people. And I think Dr. Lori Thomas does have that service oriented persona and mind that anything that she has asked me to do in the past, I have said yes to because of the passion that she shows. So I just want to give a little shout out to Dr. Lori Thomas there.
Can I add something too? Yeah, I mean, it's a joy to work with her. And it's been as she's taken on the role since, let's see, 2018 now, of director of both the Data Trust and the Urban Institute, right? So she is, once our former director Jeff Michael left his long 20 plus year career with the Urban Institute, Lori has stepped into this role. And just seeing her continue, she's already such an incredible leader, but seeing her continue to grow into this leadership position, leading us at the Urban Institute towards just more impactful work every day. It's been a great ride.
And she's a social worker too.
And
That's
she's a
true.
social worker.
And
That's how I won her heart, man, in my interview, I feel. It's like, I'm a systems level social worker. Thank you.
Yeah, strong macro representation today. Sydney, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. We appreciate your time, sharing your wisdom about the work of the Data Trust. For folks who are interested, how can they learn more about the Data Trust?
Yes, visit our website. I think there'll be several links in the show notes, but the State of Our Data report is linked publicly. All our contact information is there. Check out our data documentation and code books and send me an email. We can connect.
Awesome.
Well, thanks so much. And we look forward to sharing this episode with all of our listeners. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Thanks, Sydney.